I thought I had seen betrayal when I caught my husband cheating. But nothing prepared me for who it was with. Not a stranger. Not a coworker. Not a fling from the past. It was the woman who once tucked my hair behind my ear and told me I was like her own daughter. My stepmother. This story isn't just about infidelity. It's about double betrayal. It's about how I lost the man I married and the woman who raised me in a single night. To my amazing subscribers, thank you for being here. If this story moves you, confuses you, or makes you feel anything, please don't forget to like, comment, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of these powerful life stories. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps bring more real, raw, and emotional stories that deserve to be told. Now, let me tell you how my world unraveled. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm a 34-year-old woman from Ashland, Oregon. I've lived a quiet life, mostly the kind of life I used to think was safe, married to a man I thought I knew, in a house I believed would always be home. If you had told me 5 years ago that my marriage would be destroyed not just by who my husband slept with, but by someone who raised me, I would have laughed in disbelief. But that's exactly what happened. It all started when Vivian came back into my life. Vivian wasn't my biological mother. My real mom died of breast cancer when I was just 10. A year later, my dad married Vivian. She was this elegant, polished woman who smelled like vanilla and always had a glass of red wine in her hand. To outsiders, she looked like the perfect wife and stepmother. But to me? She always felt like a stranger in our home. Vivian never did anything cruel, but she was never warm either. She kept her distance. When I graduated high school, I left for college and never really looked back. I didn't visit much. And when Dad passed away 8 years ago, I didn't keep in touch with her. We went our separate ways. No big falling out, no screaming matches, just cold silence. So imagine my surprise when I got a message from her last year out of the blue. "Claire, I'm in town. Things haven't been easy. I was wondering if we could talk, maybe get coffee?" I almost deleted it. But guilt hit me. After all, she was my stepmother. She had been married to my dad for nearly 20 years. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she needed help. And deep down, I wanted to be a bigger person. So I met her. We sat across from each other at a quiet little cafe. She looked older but still stunning, long legs, blonde hair curled just right, a designer bag on her lap. I remember she ordered peppermint tea and complimented my wedding ring. "He must really love you," she said with that knowing smile. Looking back, that moment haunts me. After a few awkward exchanges and polite updates, she told me she'd been struggling. Her second marriage fell apart. She was living out of state but wanted to move back to Oregon. She missed the trees, she said. She was tired of running. Then came the ask. "Just for a few weeks," she said gently. "Until I get back on my feet. I could stay in the guest room. You wouldn't even know I was there." I hesitated. My husband Ethan had never met her. We'd been married 4 years, together for 6. He was kind, reliable, and calm in all the ways I was anxious. When I told him about her, he shrugged and said, "It's your call." So I let her stay. The first few days were surprisingly pleasant. She helped clean the kitchen, cooked fancy dinners I couldn't pronounce, and even charmed our neighbors. Ethan seemed impressed by her. He joked that she made better lasagna than me. I laughed. I didn't think anything of it. Then came the subtle shifts, things you don't notice when you're busy or when you want everything to be okay. Vivian started wearing silk robes around the house, long and flowy, but barely tied. I thought maybe she was just used to living alone. She poured wine every night, even if Ethan and I weren't drinking. She laughed louder at his jokes than I'd ever seen her laugh with my dad. She started giving him advice about how to handle me, as if she was an expert on our marriage. One night, I came home from work and found them in the living room. The lights were dimmed, music playing softly, wine glasses in hand. She was telling him a story about some trip to Italy, and he was staring at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the world. When I walked in, the room shifted. "Hey, Claire," she said, that smooth voice as calm as ever. "We were just talking about you." I smiled. But something inside me stirred. I wanted to believe it was harmless. I wanted to trust my husband. And more than that, I wanted to believe Vivian had changed, that she wasn't still the cold, controlling woman who married my father. But over the next few weeks, I noticed Ethan pulling away from me. He stopped texting me during the day. We barely talked at night. When I tried to touch him, he seemed distracted. His excuses? Stress from work. Just tired. Nothing to worry about. And Vivian? She was always around. Floating in and out of the kitchen. Whispering something to him and smiling like a secret was shared. I told myself I was imagining it. Until one night, I wasn't. I came home late from a meeting. As I walked through the hallway toward the guest room, I heard laughter, low and intimate. The kind of laughter you don't share with someone you see as a mother. I pressed my ear to the door. My heart dropped. Vivian's voice, "She doesn't know a thing. Ethan, you make me feel alive again." "She doesn't." My breath caught in my throat. My knees went weak. I didn't open the door. I didn't scream. I just walked away, like a ghost in my own house. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor and stared at myself in the mirror. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. Not yet. The worst part was knowing exactly who it was, with no proof to confront them. But that would come soon enough. And when it did, I wouldn't just lose my husband. I'd lose every illusion I had about love, trust, and family. They say your gut knows before your mind catches up. I think mine knew the moment she stepped foot into our home. But I buried it, under politeness, guilt, and the desperate need to believe that family, even when broken, still meant something. After that night outside the guest room door, I barely slept. I told myself I must have misheard. I told myself maybe I'd misunderstood. But the way Ethan avoided me the next morning? The way Vivian didn't even flinch, acting as if the air wasn't suffocating between us? That was the confirmation I didn't want. Still, I wasn't ready to accuse anyone without proof. Because that's what betrayal does, it doesn't stab you clean. It twists inside you until you start doubting yourself. I started watching them. At first, it was subtle. I'd noticed the way Vivian would accidentally brush her hand against Ethan's arm as she passed him in the kitchen. The way she started wearing makeup in the house again, though she claimed she was just lounging. And Ethan? He was always so measured, so calm. But now he was tense. He barely made eye contact with me. And when I tried to kiss him, it felt like kissing a stranger. One night I asked him directly, as gently as I could. "Is there something going on between you and Vivian?" His eyes widened in shock, too wide. Too acted. "Claire, are you serious? She's your stepmother." "That's insane." I nodded and smiled. But something in me died a little. That night, I started digging. I checked his phone while he was in the shower. He had a passcode I didn't know. That in itself was new. He used to leave his phone anywhere. Now, it was always face down, password protected, and glued to him like a lifeline. I didn't get in that night. But I kept watching. Observing. Waiting. And then it happened. A Thursday evening. Ethan had gone for a run, or so he said. Vivian was in the kitchen, humming as she wiped down the counters. She looked up and smiled at me like she hadn't hollowed out my marriage with her perfectly manicured fingers. "You okay, darling? You seem tense lately." That word, darling. It made my skin crawl. I went into the laundry room, sat on the floor, and did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I cried into a towel. Quiet, desperate sobs. The kind you do when your reality no longer matches the one you built in your head. That night, after everyone went to bed, I tried again. This time, I got lucky. Ethan had left his phone charging on the nightstand. I knew his old passcode, the one he used for everything before he needed more privacy. I tried it out of muscle memory. It worked. I still wonder if part of him wanted me to find out. What I saw made my stomach drop. Dozens of deleted messages, partially recovered in an app he didn't know synced to the cloud. Texts that weren't just sexual, but intimate. Emotionally charged. Raw. From Vivian. I can't stop thinking about last night. She has no idea. It's almost exciting. I wish I could fall asleep next to you like that every night. One even had a picture. Nothing explicit, but enough. Vivian lying on the guest room bed. In my robe. That was all the proof I needed. And yet. I sat there, paralyzed. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't march into the guest room and pull her out by her hair, though I fantasized about it. Instead, I took screenshots. All of it. And then I sat in silence for the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling while Ethan slept beside me like nothing was broken. The next morning, I asked her. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I waited until we were alone in the kitchen. Vivian, I said calmly, how long have you been sleeping with my husband? She didn't blink. Didn't pretend to be confused. She just tilted her head and smiled, that smile, the same one she wore at my wedding, the same one she used when she pretended to care about me. Claire, she said softly, if you were giving him what he needed, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That was the moment I realized she didn't even regret it. This wasn't an accident. This was calculated. She wanted him. And she took him. Not because she loved him, but because she could. I slapped her. I don't even remember doing it, but I remember the sound, sharp and satisfying. She touched her cheek, laughed quietly, and walked out of the room. And just like that, my world split in two. When Ethan came home, I was packed. He tried to explain, to stammer through half-truths and excuses. But the only thing I heard was silence. I left that night. No dramatic exit. No public fight. Just me, a small suitcase, and my dignity in pieces. I drove to a friend's place and stayed on her couch. And for the first time in years, I felt everything. Pain. Anger. Grief. But also, clarity. Because now I knew the truth. And soon, so would everyone else. I always thought that if my marriage ever fell apart, it would be over something ordinary. Maybe a slow drift. Maybe money problems. Not this. Not her. Not Vivian. That night, after I left the house, I sat in my car outside my friend Melanie's place for almost an hour before I knocked. She was one of the few people I trusted with anything, an old college friend who knew my marriage well, and who hated fake smiles. She opened the door and took one look at my face. What happened? I couldn't even speak. I just collapsed into her arms. She didn't ask again. She brought me inside, made me tea, and let me cry. When the tears finally stopped, I showed her the screenshots on my phone. At first, she blinked like she couldn't process what she was reading. Wait. Vivian? As in, your stepmother? I nodded. Jesus, Claire, she whispered. That's not cheating. That's war. For a day or two, I stayed quiet. I shut off my phone. I didn't respond to Ethan's texts or calls. He left voicemails, half begging, half gaslighting. Please talk to me. You're blowing this out of proportion. She meant nothing. It was just, it got out of hand. What he didn't know was that I had already sent the messages to myself, backed them up, and kept them in 3 different folders. And what Vivian didn't know was that I had more. Because Vivian, for all her cold calculation, made one mistake, she didn't delete the messages she sent from her own phone. When I confronted her, I had also taken photos of her phone, just before I left. The messages mirrored Ethan's. Her voice was colder. More dominant. She's too soft. Too needy. I bet she's never made you feel like a man. You're wasting your prime years on a girl who doesn't even see you. She's nothing like me. You know that now. That last message gutted me. Because that's what it was really about. Vivian didn't want Ethan because she loved him. She wanted him because he was mine. By the third day, I broke the silence. I texted Ethan and told him I wanted to meet. Publicly. Neutral ground. No Vivian. We met at a diner outside town, one of those places with plastic booths and sticky syrup bottles on every table. He looked wrecked. Unshaven. Pale. A version of the man I married, but hollowed out. "Claire," he said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "Don't," I said quietly. He nodded, swallowing hard. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then I opened my phone and slid it across the table. "I have everything. Every word. Every photo. Every disgusting excuse you fed her." He didn't even try to deny it. He just sat there with his head down. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered. I laughed. Not a kind laugh. A bitter, cracked laugh. "You know what hurts the most?" I asked, leaning in. "It's not that you slept with her. It's that you let her inside our home. You let her poison you against me. And you enjoyed it." His eyes filled with tears. I didn't care. "Claire, I was lost. You were distant. We were. Don't you dare blame this on me," I snapped. "I was building a life. You were tearing it down with the one woman who should have never even looked at you that way." The waitress dropped off coffee. Neither of us touched it. "Are you in love with her?" I finally asked. Cross mark. He hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I stood up. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." That afternoon, I did what I once thought I'd never do. I sent the screenshots to my Aunt Karen, my father's sister. She hated drama, but she despised betrayal. She had always suspected Vivian of manipulating her way into my dad's life. Now, she had the proof. Then I sent them to my cousin Emily. Then to Melanie. Then to 2 other friends who'd known me since high school. I didn't ask them to keep it secret. I didn't say anything at all. Just, "This is why I left. You deserve to know." And like wildfire, the truth began to spread. It didn't take long before the gossip circle in our small town kicked into full gear. I stayed quiet and let the whispers work in my favor. Some people sided with Ethan, men who shrugged and said, "These things happen." But most were stunned. Disgusted. Because this wasn't just adultery. This was something darker. Vivian had crossed a sacred line. She had played stepmother for years, sat beside me at my wedding, toasted us with champagne, and then turned around and seduced my husband behind my back. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was calculated. She doesn't deserve to show her face again. And then something happened I wasn't expecting. Vivian called me. I stared at the name flashing on my screen. I let it ring. Then I let it go to voicemail. She left a message, her voice as calm and venomous as ever. "I assume you've made your little rounds. But remember, Claire, people forget. They always do. I've been through worse than you." I saved the voicemail. For myself. For court. For the days I needed to remember who I was dealing with. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a story of heartbreak. It was a story of survival. Of fire. Of rebuilding from ash. Because I had lost a marriage. But I was about to reclaim myself. They say once the truth is out, you feel lighter. But that's not always true. Sometimes, when the dust settles and the silence hits, that's when the real weight drops on your chest. When I exposed Ethan and Vivian, I expected anger. I expected whispers. What I didn't expect was for the story to start changing, twisting, until somehow, I became the villain in my own pain. The first sign came from a mutual friend, Samantha. She messaged me a few days after everything exploded. "Hey, Claire, just checking in. I heard some things. Vivian says you've been struggling for a while. Like, emotionally. That you were paranoid, and maybe, exaggerated things." I stared at the screen in disbelief. That woman who destroyed my marriage, was now playing the mental health card? Vivian had always been skilled with words. She didn't need to lie outright. She just planted seeds. She told people I was fragile. That my father's death hit me hard. That I never liked her. That maybe I imagined things. And worse. She said I sent the screenshots out of jealousy. Claire couldn't handle how close Ethan and I became after I moved in, she told someone. She twisted things. It was stunning. She seduced my husband, blew up my life, and somehow convinced some people I had imagined it all out of insecurity. Ethan didn't say much publicly. That was his style, passive, quiet, always trying to look like the good guy. But his silence let Vivian control the narrative. I started getting side eyes at the grocery store. Someone from my old book club removed me from the group chat. And then Melanie, my rock, called me, furious. "You won't believe this. Vivian's posting cryptic quotes on Facebook." I looked for myself. Some people destroy themselves trying to destroy others. Be careful who you trust. Victims wear disguises too. It was like watching a snake dress up in silk and pretend it was a dove. But I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't defend myself online. Because I knew the truth. And I had documents to back it up. A week later, I filed for divorce. I sat in my lawyer's office, the quiet humming of the fluorescent lights above me, as I signed the papers with a pen that felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. "He won't fight you on this," my attorney said. "He knows what he's done." But Ethan did try to negotiate. Not for love. Not for forgiveness. But for image. "Can we keep this quiet?" he asked in a last-minute email. "I'd rather we not turn this into a war." I didn't reply. This wasn't a war I started. But I'd be damned if I let him, or her, walk away clean. And just when I thought the storm was beginning to pass, Vivian dropped her final weapon. She filed a civil complaint against me. Accusing me of defamation. It was almost laughable, except it wasn't. She claimed I'd shared edited messages, that I had intentionally spread falsehoods to damage her reputation and cause emotional distress. The woman who dismantled my marriage was now suing me for emotional distress. It was a strategy, of course. Designed to intimidate me. Make me back down. But she had no idea who I had become since the day I walked out of that house. I didn't back down. My lawyer prepared a countersuit, with evidence. Screenshots. Phone logs. The voicemail she left me, laced with threats. Even Ethan's old messages, which contradicted her statements. When her attorney saw the proof, the case quietly disappeared. She withdrew the complaint 2 weeks later. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. But even then, the damage had already rippled through my life. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was the friends I lost. People I thought would stand beside me who chose the easier path. The neutral path. The path that required no discomfort. "I just don't want to get involved," one friend said. "I wasn't there." "I don't know the whole story," said another. It broke me. Not because I needed an army. But because it showed me how quickly the world turns its back when a woman dares to speak up. Still, not everyone turned away. Aunt Karen stood by me like a soldier. Melanie never wavered. And slowly, quietly, people began to come back. Whispered messages. Quiet apologies. I didn't want to believe it, but I see it now. Vivian's done this kind of thing before. I just never had the proof. I moved out of town 3 months later. Started fresh in a small apartment 2 hours south. No photos of my wedding in this place. No memories etched into the walls. Just peace. Space. Healing. Ethan tried calling once more before the divorce finalized. I didn't answer. Vivian never contacted me again. Ethan tried calling once more before the divorce finalized. I didn't answer. Vivian never contacted me again. But every now and then, I see her name pop up online. At some event. Volunteering at some charity. Looking polished and perfect, like nothing ever happened. And part of me still wonders if she ever loved anyone she hurt. But I don't dwell on her anymore. Because I know what she did. And I know I survived it. Some people say time heals everything. I don't believe that. Time doesn't heal everything. But it does reveal things. Like who you really are when everything falls apart. Like who stays. Like what you're still standing for even when the floor you trusted gives out beneath you. When I moved to that small apartment 2 hours away, I didn't take much with me. Just a few bags, a small box of keepsakes, and the photo of my mom, the real one, that I kept hidden in my closet for years. It took losing my marriage and my stepmother in the same breath to realize that somewhere along the line, I'd stopped living for me. I had become the woman who wanted to keep the peace. Who made herself smaller to fit into other people's expectations. Who called her own discomfort overreacting. And who excused betrayal because she didn't want to make others uncomfortable. But I wasn't her anymore. Not after Ethan. Not after Vivian. I started therapy. It was messy at first, like peeling off layers of skin. But the more I talked, the more I began to see that the affair wasn't the beginning of my pain. It was the mirror that reflected all the cracks that had been there for years. My marriage wasn't healthy. Ethan wasn't honest. Vivian was never a mother figure, she was a manipulator wearing a warm smile. And I'd spent years trying to make broken pieces look like a masterpiece. But once I stopped trying. Once I let it all fall apart. That's when healing finally started. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a letter. It was handwritten. No return address. It was from Vivian. Claire. I don't expect forgiveness. I doubt I deserve it. But for what it's worth, I never set out to hurt you. I was lonely. Ethan was weak. And maybe part of me wanted to feel young again. Maybe I saw in him what I couldn't have anymore: attention, validation, desire. You always reminded me of your mother. And I guess I hated that. I hope one day you find peace. I hope I do too. Vivian. I read the letter once. Then I burned it. It wasn't anger. It was freedom. Because I didn't need her explanation. I didn't need her guilt, or her regret, or her half-baked apologies. What I needed was mine again. My voice. My peace. My power. A year passed. Then another. I didn't date right away. I didn't feel the need to. I spent time rebuilding myself in quiet ways, reading again, cooking for no one but myself, traveling to places I'd always said, maybe next year, about. I stopped explaining myself to people. Stopped apologizing for my boundaries. Stopped pretending I was fine when I wasn't. And somewhere between the long walks, the solo dinners, and the therapy sessions, I found something better than love. I found self-respect. The last time I saw Ethan was by accident. 2 years after the divorce, I ran into him at a bookstore in Portland. He looked older. Tired. He was alone. He blinked when he saw me, like he wasn't sure I was real. Claire, he said, awkward smile on his lips. You look good. I nodded. I didn't say much. I heard you moved, he added. I did, I said simply. Best thing I ever did. There was a silence between us that felt like closing a heavy book. Vivian and I didn't work out, he admitted after a beat. I raised my eyebrows. Was that supposed to make me feel better? He didn't answer. And I didn't ask anything else. I walked away that day not because I hated him, but because I had nothing left to say to him. He was part of a chapter in my life that was finished. And I had finally learned not to reread it. Today, I tell my story not to shame them. Not to dwell. But to remind any woman out there, if someone betrays you, that says more about them than it ever will about you. Your worth isn't tied to their weakness. Your pain isn't proof you were too much. It's proof you were real in a world full of fakes. I lost my husband. I lost my stepmother. And for a while, I thought I'd lost myself too. But looking back now, that loss was the beginning of everything good. I found me. And that was worth every tear. That's the end.